What's up, everyone? It's your boy. As you can see, sitting behind me, a 1972 Ford Pinto. This is just one of several cars that I think are undeservedly hated upon. So today I'm going to be breaking down this and a few others. We're talking Lexus SC430, we're talking Chrysler PT Cruiser, a few more. It's not just that these cars don't suck, it's also that they can be pretty great. So let's dig in. First up, we've got the Chrysler PT Cruiser. It's seen as this kind of dorky boomer mobile. Now, the PT Cruiser first appeared in the late 1990s. This was at the same time as Volkswagen's new Beetle. There's kind of a big retro movement going on. And the PT Cruiser, if you don't remember, it was a big deal when it came out. You know, underneath it was just a very simple front-wheel drive economy car. Underpinnings actually shared with the Dodge Neon, but it had this, kind of retro-looking 1940s, 50s looking body that was, modernized for the new millennium. It was practical. It was good on gas. It was cheap to buy. And I guess anytime a company can make a product that people get excited about.
What the?
The Chrysler PT Cruiser, you've never seen anything like it.
They obviously deserve some respect, but it definitely stood out. It was not the kind of bland mobile that so many, especially American car makers, were building at that time. I would say personally, I think they can look pretty cool. You put the right wheels on them, you give them the right stance. Better yet, a little bit later in the run, they introduced the PT Cruiser GT. The way it was almost like a kind of retro-looking hot hatch. But the PT Cruiser has actually stood the test of time pretty well. It's been, 15 years almost since they stopped building it. It's been more than 20 years since they introduced it. And a lot of people still just drive them every day as normal cars. You see them pretty often, at least I do around here in California. I would not be surprised to see people kind of come around to them in the coming years. Alright, next up we move to the Lexus SC430.
Le nouveau cabriolet. Il m'appelle. Beau.
So the SC430, it followed up the first generation Lexus SC, which that itself is a pretty great car. When Lexus introduced the second generation SC, they went in a very different direction. It was a convertible only with a power folding hardtop. It had just one engine, a 4.3 liter V8, the same that was in the Lexus LS at the time, and a few other vehicles as well. It had this very kind of soft, I'm country club image. Initially, I'm sure a lot of people that bought it were of that crowd. I believe the original BBC Top Gear, at one point they called the Lexus SC430 the worst car in the world. The SC430 actually has a decent amount of motorsport representation. In Japanese Super GT racing, the SC430 actually replaced the Supra. More recently in drifting, Saito Daigo drove an SC430 when he first came to Formula Drift in the US several years ago.
Saito! Are you kidding me?
It's obviously bulletproof reliable. It's a Toyota after all. It's rear wheel drive. The biggest problem with the SC430 was that it was just kind of dowdy looking stock. If you put it on some good wheels, you drop it down, and it transforms the way they look. Next up, we get to a pretty big one here, the Ford Pinto.
He drives a Ford Pinto, but that's not surprising.
Now, if there's one car that can beat the PT Cruiser when it comes to being made fun of, it's got to be the Ford Pinto. Now, the Pinto earned a bad reputation, not because it was small and cheap, which it was, but because of a safety issue where if it was hit from a certain angle in the rear, the fuel tank would basically blow up. aside from that minor little detail, the Pinto was actually a pretty good little car.
Check out the complete line of Ford Pintos yourself at your local Ford dealers. Another better idea from Ford.
The Pinto was built to compete against cars like the Volkswagen Beetle and the Toyota Corolla and other, small imports that were coming to the U.S. at the time. Pretty successful car, and Ford sold a lot of them. It had an overhead cam engine. The Pinto is actually a pretty legitimate little enthusiast vehicle. One of the great things about the Pinto is you can put so many different kinds of engines in it. The 2.3 turbo motor from the Mustang SVO and the Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupe drops right in, and that's an easy swap. Back in the day, tons of people would put V8s into them. You can use a lot of the same parts from Mustang, just with a lot less weight. The Pinto could even handle pretty well, again due to that light weight. The Pinto was actually used in small displacement Trans Am sedan racing against cars like the BMW 2002 and the Datsun 510. I would say the Pinto is definitely cool in its own way, even if it's an ironic kind of cool. I mean, come on, how can you hate on a car that's actually called the Cruisin' Wagon?
All right, so I'm a little biased here. This is a 1972 Ford Pinto that I paid $1,200 for. A previous owner had swapped in the 2.3 liter turbocharged engine from the Ford Thunderbird. As you can see, that's why it has the hood scoop. It was to clear the intake manifold on the turbo motor. I actually sold this car to my brother a while back. He was in the process of putting a new transmission and a bunch of other stuff in it. But if you can just imagine this car looking pretty much just as it does right now. As you can see, cosmetically, it's not the nicest car around, but in a way that just kind of adds to the charm. So if you imagine this car just making a bunch of really cool turbo noises and going really fast, you can basically see why this car was so much fun. One more reason why I have such a soft spot for the Pinto, and why this car can be a lot cooler than it's made out to be.
Speaking of cars that are becoming ironically cool, the Pontiac Aztec has to be on the top of the list. You had to know this one was coming, right? Pretty much from the moment this thing debuted, it was met with almost universal despise. It had this very strange kind of hatchback, triangular shape. Pontiac was big on body cladding, and the Aztec had plenty of that. It was hard to call it attractive by any means. Then again, if you look at it compared to the cars of today, as we've seen normal cars get more and more aggressive and over the top with their styling. In fact, you could almost say that the Aztec was ahead of its time in bringing this kind of over the top look. So who's laughing now, folks? Maybe the GM designers were just ahead of the game, Now the Aztec was definitely ahead of its time when it came to at least to the marketing and image. The whole thing with the Aztec is that it was kind of marketed to this young, adventurous crowd. And you could have a cooler, a factory cooler in between the front seats, separate audio system in the back for tailgating. Factory accessory, there was a tent that you could hook to the rear for camping.
Keep your fingers off my pieces.
I'm not cheating. That's not right.
Right now, the big thing is with people that like to outfit their rigs like they're going on some sort of crazy expedition.
We're not lost.
Overlanding? The Aztec was doing that before it was cool. Without a doubt, the Aztec is probably one of the most controversial, talked about, and recognized cars of the early 2000s. And for that alone, any car that I guess is that notable, I would say did something right. Last but not least, minivans. Not just one model, but all of them, really. Minivan first came onto the scene in the 1980s with the Dodge Caravan. Now, this was a pretty groundbreaking vehicle.
You've never seen anything like it because there's never been anything like it. It's our new Dodge Caravan.
It basically built the segment from scratch. By the 1990s, just about every brand had a minivan. It kind of became synonymous with the soccer mom image of the 90s. But it was hard to argue because they had a ton of space inside. Sliding doors made them very easy to carry people or things. If you're my age, if you were a kid back in the 90s, either you have one or someone you know or a family member had a minivan. They may have been a victim of their own success in some ways. So many people are, ditching the minivan and moving over to a crossover or SUV or something because they want to look active. But I think they just don't know how cool a minivan can be. And if you don't believe me about this, just go over to Japan where they've kind of perfected the art of the sexy minivan. And if you want to get really wild, minivans can actually be modified to do some pretty cool things. Take the current generation Toyota Sienna, for example. In recent years, we've seen these things modified to do everything from hot lapping around the track. People are going off-roading with them, they're lifting them, they have all-wheel drive. And they definitely stand out a lot more than your typical SUV. So with so many people moving away from these into crossovers and SUVs, in a way the minivan has almost become kind of like the rebellious choice. And I'd say for that alone, on top of all the other things I just said, the minivan is definitely a winner in my book.
Dodge Caravan.
I could keep going and going about all the cars that I don't think get the respect they deserve, but those 5 I think highlight things pretty well for me. Now I'm curious to see, do you agree with me here? Do you guys have your own picks for cars that are unjustifiably hated upon or cars that are criticized for the wrong reasons? I'm curious to see what you think. This is kind of it's a fun topic to kind of give some love to the underdog here. And as usual, make sure you subscribe. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button. We'll know to keep it coming. If there's any topics you want to see discussed, hit us up below and we will try to get to them. Yeah, thanks for watching as usual, and stay tuned for more coming real soon. Bye-bye, everyone.